Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this seminar looking at the strategy of a farrier business. Just a little bit about myself. My current role, I'm the General Manager and Director of Mustad Australia, and also a Director of Saddlery, which is around Victoria, South Australia and ACT and in southern New South Wales. My qualifications, I have a Bachelor of Commerce. I'm also a certified practicing accountant, and I'm also a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors. In terms of accounting, my experience is mainly around general management and management accounting. So that's more of the roles I'm involved in. Volunteer roles, and I'll touch on that later. I've listed a few volunteer roles in there just because when you're running a business, it's always good to have some other interactions with people outside of your general, out of your industry that you're in. And you can actually learn from other people. As the quote there says, it's valuable to take on roles beyond your day-to-day job. Great for fresh thinking, and even better when it connects you to your family and your community, particularly if you've got a young family, for sure. Some of the nice times I remember is being involved with kids' schools and their sporting clubs and the like. You meet a lot of new friends, and it does give you a little bit of different diversity of thought in some aspects. Farrier industry background. For the record, I'm not a farrier. I would love to be a farrier and be able to do it, but I can't. I've grown up watching my father, Carl O'Dwyer, who's been a farrier up until 2024, where he had to retire. He broke his hip. And I've also been able to be involved and meet with a lot of different farriers prior to working in the supply industry. Many farriers came and stayed with us when I was a young boy, and got to meet a lot of different farriers from all over Australia, New Zealand, and all over different parts of the world. But also, just in terms of some initial housekeeping, this presentation is it's not to be considered personal or financial advice. It's general information based on my observations over many years in the hoof care industry. I recommend that you consult a licensed financial advisor if you need financial advice to take into account your own personal circumstances. We'll also be recording this webinar, and there will be time for a Q&A at the end of the presentation if you have any questions. If you want to reach out after the webinar and ask me some questions, feel free to email me. I'll share my email at the end of the presentation. Areas for discussion. So what are we going to discuss? We're going to look at customer segmentation and what it is. And it really is one of the keys for a successful business, because it aligns with your strategy. So I'll go through customer segmentation and my observations and how that could relate to a farrier business. Dealing with customers, also talk about that. It can be challenging at times. It can be very rewarding. You can make great relationships through your the services you're providing, but I'll discuss that because it can sometimes lead to difficult conversations. Dealing with suppliers, absolutely, suppliers are no different to farriers. We in the supply industry have many of the same pain points, not all, but many, and it's generally what businesses face on a day-to-day occurrence. There's always challenges. We'll look at my observations on pain points for farriers, dealing with confrontation, with customers, suppliers, and other farriers. That is a tough one. That's a big one. Difficult conversations, confrontation. How you deal with that. It really can be an anxious situation for many people. So it's just learning some tips there that may be helpful. Dealing with financial pressure, we'll go through that a little bit further, and the difficult conversations already mentioned. Now, there's the thoughts here to consider for farriers. Now, these are meant to be I make these comments here to provoke thought with you all, because it is, can be quite provocative. If you look at the first one there, I want you to think of these 3 comments, and we'll circle back to them at the end of the webinar. But horse owners, riders, trainers, horse farm managers are not your friends. You have a contractual agreement, and it's most likely verbal, to provide a hoof care service to them. So just think about that, because you do have complex relationships in business with your customers, and it can get tricky at times. What do all of the above individuals do if you cannot provide a hoof care service to their horses? And that could be because of you're incapacitated, or you're unwell, you can't fulfill the next cycle. So what do they do? And I'm sure so we'll come back to that. And remember, this is one that you understand more as you get older, in everything that we do, and not just for being a farrier, but every horse you provide a hoof care service to is one less that you can provide a hoof care service to. So make it count. We are, as individuals, you have one body, and we wear out. So it's how you manage that and optimize, those that skill and that ability to be able to perform that service. It does have a value to it for sure, and we sometimes, I think, forget that we only have one body. Okay, looking at the farrier life cycle here, and I've put this on a graph, just to put it out here for everyone to consider, because depending on what cycle or what age group you're within your cycle, and the age is down here with the horses that you provide a service to. And I would like to stress that this is looking at it from a conservative angle in terms of numbers. Like I know many of you will be servicing or doing more hoof care services than what's depicted here. But we'll work through some scenarios in the webinar, later on. But it'll give you an understanding of, what you could do or what you could consider. But looking here, at the age of 17 or so, this is where you're with this broken line. This is where, you're an apprentice and you're learning, and you're getting, exposure to the hoof care industry, and learning from teachers. So from 20 onwards, many of you are still finishing off your apprenticeship, or finished early. And where it's green, this is where, many farriers that I've observed, and it's not just farriers, it's young people in general, you're considering yourself bulletproof. You're not going to get injured. This is going to continue to keep going on, and you continually, just treat your body as if it's going to be able to continue. But then something happens in the red line. So between that age of 30 and 50, this is where, being a very, very tough industry with 400 to 500 kilos of horse flesh leaning on you, unpredictable at times, you start to feel those aches and pains, and your body is starting to talk to you and say, okay, I've got a sore back, or it's certainly a really key period of time where you need to listen to your body. Then, of course, when you get to the golden line, that's where you're likely at the peak of your knowledge and your understanding of the hoof care industry, and your reputation is getting bigger, and people are looking to you as a leader. So it's how you actually use that knowledge as part of your business. So everyone's going to be in a different age cycle, and that is going to impact how many horses that you can service per year in terms of a hoof care service. If we look at farriers, it's no different to really an athlete in terms of the physical abuse that your body gets. If you look at your career and this stage that you're at, are you preparing for longevity? Are you managing how many horses that you're going to service each week, each day? you take into account the if you overexert your body, how much more likely are you to get injury? Are you doing maintenance? What does an elite athlete do? Do they limit their the amount of games they're playing if they're playing a team sport? And of course they do, because they want to be able to peak at a certain level. So in terms of your body and what age and cycle you're at in terms of the Farrier life cycle, listen to it, prepare for it. It's easier said than done, I know, but the more you look after your body and give it maintenance in terms of physio, myo, doing your exercises in terms of going to the gym, core strength, you're going to have more longevity. You're going to be able to do this job for a lot longer. All right, customer segmentation here. This is a really, really important way of looking at your business, because many industries, and this is a very simplified pyramid, but many industries will segment their customer profiles and target the actual segment that they want to transact with. And being a farrier, that is no different, and it's going to affect farriers in many ways, because if you look at deciding where you want to live, for example, that's going to be impacted by the segment that you're going to target. Now, if we look at segment A at the top of the pyramid there, they are generally high income, high net worth individuals. They live within 50 to 100 kilometers of major cities. They demand great service, high quality job, but they'll pay you for it. And the reality too is that this is the cream of the crop. This is the cream of your targeted segment, but there's not a lot of them. So you need to structure your business on how you're going to differentiate yourself from the farrier next to you, or what are you going to do to be able to attract the business there, and we'll discuss some of that in the following slides on things to consider. But it's definitely something that has a financial impact on you over time as a professional. In terms of segment B, these are often trainers, studs, adult riders, camp drafters, pony clubs. They're within that 50 to 200 kilometers of major cities. They still expect great service and a quality job, but they want it at a reasonable price. They understand that it's not going to be ridiculously low, and they're not going to be price conscious. However, they are wanting a reasonable value, but they'll still pay for the service you're going to do. Then we've got segment C, price conscious. Bottom of the pyramid, there's not a lot of positive things to say this area, and I'm sure that many of you have experienced this, but these are the very price conscious. The working conditions are terrible. The payment can often be an issue. They're just really hard work, and in reality, if you're wanting to position yourself and your business in a strong area for the future, it's a segment you don't particularly want to be in. If you're looking at some points here, if you're looking at those top two segments, that's going to be a bonus for you, because understanding where you're going to set up. If you're a young farrier, you're going to want to target those areas in that 100 to 150 kilometer radius. Living on the fringe of major cities is also not a bad thing, because over time, and past performance isn't a guarantee of future performance, but over time, property values and land values generally will go up if you buy in the right area. And I've witnessed, particularly in parts of Australia and New Zealand, the many harness racing trainers have made a hell of a lot more money selling their 10 and 20 acre lots to developers than they ever did out of the harness racing industry, for example. So if you're looking at that segment of A to B and you want to live on those fringe areas that are the outside of where those segment A and B customers are, think of it strategically. How am I going to set yourself up? If we're looking at an example of where a young farrier might be in terms of a scenario, and you might be coming into your profession, you're in your early mid-20s, you're starting out after your apprenticeship, and you're picking up customers in segment C who are price conscious, and segment B, so that are want a good service and a quality job, but they certainly want to be able to they're starting to recognize you as a young farrier. The difference there is it's going to have an impact on how much you can charge, because of the level of the customer you're going to be shoeing for. It also means that you should also adjust the service levels that you're going to give those customers as well, because the higher the segment, the more service they're going to expect. But in these examples, I should highlight that this is a high-level scenario for both this scenario and scenario 2 that will follow. It's not something that you would look at for racing stables. Yes, you definitely have customer segmentation in the thoroughbred racing industry and harness racing as well. But in this scenario, the numbers would look a hell of a lot different. So we won't touch on the thoroughbred side, but you can still, if you're in that industry, think of the trainers you're working for and think of where you would put them in this pyramid. That's something that all of us can do. Look at your customer base and decide who you could, would they be in C, B, or A? It's every business does it. If we look here, one of the costs of materials is certainly a big impact on every business. Looking through how much your materials cost, you need to be all over that, because it does have an impact. In all of these scenarios, we're looking at 1,380 services, which is mixed between trims and shoeing. The shoeing will have 33% refit rate, and there'll be an element of steel and aluminium in the shoes, and then the trims, 460 trims. Now, the other thing that we've put in here, and I've tried to look at a scenario where you've got a work-life balance. That's definitely easier said than done. But if you're working off 46 weeks and 20 full sets per week and 10 trims, these are the numbers that extrapolate out. And I've based it on St. Croix Concord extra steels, St. Croix Concord extra aluminium shoes, Mustad nails, and a Hella rasp. So this in this scenario, we've looked at a total cost of around $31,000. You can do that exercise yourself. Looking at the customer segmentation of scenario 1 and what the actual numbers extrapolate out to based on what I've just mentioned. If you're looking at you're only servicing segment B and you're looking at segment C, you're looking at a total revenue of $154,100. Now, I'm basing these numbers excluding GST, goods and services tax, or value-added tax, depending on where you're located, but it's all excluding tax. So the one thing to highlight too is this is not what you're earning. This is what you're turning over. So this is a very, very different scenario. Banks will be looking at, okay, what your bottom line is. If you take into account your material costs, then you take into account your vehicle costs, particularly if you're getting a new vehicle that you're paying out via a loan or a lease. Then you've got your running costs, you've got your registration, insurance. $25,000 does come up to that amount very quickly, particularly taking into account your the amount of kilometres you're travelling and the fuel you're burning. You also need to allow some funds for insurance, income protection, accounting, and some financial advice. It's certainly something you should allow for. You've got other general expenses here that would be cost of running your business. This would be maintaining your body. If you go to a physio or myo, or you need to do some maintenance, get a fortnightly massage to just keep your body in good shape. Looking at other things like gym memberships, build up your core strength. It's certainly those things you need to put into your business. If you're looking in this scenario, after taking those expenses into account, your salary cost is, in this scenario, is around about $81,422 before tax. So looking at those numbers, which are potentially, conservative, I'll grant that, because most farriers are not working 46 weeks. It's a question of those, should we be looking at that and looking at managing your body and the numbers you're doing? And again, I'll say it's easier said than done, but that personal income per horse that you're averaging for a service is $59. So you've got to ask yourself, is that where you want to be? Is that where you're aiming to be? And generally, no, is where it is. Because if you move into this segment, which is or scenario 2, and you look at segment A and segment B, where you're delighting the customers in A, and your customer service in B is very good, and you're operating between those two with no effort in segment C, then you're in a far better financial position. You're doing the same amount of services, 1,380 total hoof care services, including shoeings and trims, but your customer base is a lot different. Your total revenue then increases to $206,000, but in total. So you've got 60% in this scenario for segment A and 40% for segment B. It extrapolates out very differently. So if you look at this, your material costs, they're going to be similar. You may have some variations for therapeutics and the like, but your total indirect costs are going to add up to a similar amount of $41,000 for your vehicle, your insurance, and the like. But your net profit before tax increases to $133,000, or $96 per horse. So when you're going for finance and you're looking at going to the bank, they're looking at what this bottom line is here. What your actually income is that you're going to be taking away. So they're not going to be looking at this top income, what you're actually turning over. They're going to be assessing you based on this. So if you look at the difference between the two, it's approximately $50,000 more income for the same personal exertion effort. The only difference is that obviously your skill set needs to be up to standard, but your service levels need to be well above average. So you need to be able to look at your strategy and what you're going to do for those customers that is going to set you apart from your competitors. And if you're looking at these amounts, and I have been conservative, there's many people servicing segment A that are actually invoicing far more than $200. So if you look at those numbers there, could be conservative. So it's thinking about your business and where you're at. Where do you want to be? I think the other thing to note too with this scenario, if you're in a family environment and you've got a partner that's doing your bookwork, get some financial advice, because and get your tax planning, particularly if you're new to to getting this sort of getting your income up and you've got a tax issue. Because if you get the right tax advice, depending on the country that you live in, then you're going to end up being better prepared and paying less tax. An example of this would be in Australia. If you have a partner who's a bookkeeper, that bookkeeper's doing your scheduling, they're collecting all the information to collate for your accountant, then you can actually pay that your partner a realistic annual wage based on the personal exertion income that they're actually performing on your behalf. That means that you can split that income or pay that person within the tax laws in Australia. So get the advice. Go to a licensed tax agent and get the advice for sure. Okay, how do I get to my target segment? Okay, you've just looked at those numbers, and I'm suggesting 46 weeks as a target, because you need to be able to have that work-life balance. You know, how many farriers are running a business and never get a holiday? How many farriers get unwell and you have to keep working through it? Like, I mean, I see it time and time again, and the impact that can have. It can not only have a physical impact on you, it also has a mental impact on you, and you know, your mental health, as we know today, which the world has got better in that aspect. We're all very much aware of it. You certainly need to be able to manage that, and it affects your family too if you're in a family environment. So first you need to do is know your job. So, you know, if you want to get into servicing segment A, you've got to gain the experience. You know, you've got to get that experience through your apprenticeship. You then got to go and work for farriers who have the expertise in the area that you want to set up, or where you want to live. Or it could be that you want to work with someone in a different state, with the bearing in mind that you want to move somewhere to set up. You know, that certainly can be advantageous, because if you remember back to the slide I just showed on the farrier life cycle, where you've got your young bulletproof farrier who's, you know, hungry for the numbers and wanting to get somewhere quick. But at the other end, you've got the older farrier who's wanting to slow down a little bit because your body's aching. Can often be a really good mix, where, you know, the younger farrier works for the older farrier and gains experience. I think you've just got to be open with each other and have the discussion of where you want to be. You know, what the older farrier or the more experienced farrier wants from this relationship, and the younger farrier is craving knowledge. So it could be something that works out well for you, because the younger farrier can do the numbers and the older farrier can supervise and keep a really good you know, handle on what's going on. And I often think back to some of the stories that I've heard many stories from my father Carl, and when he was starting out many years ago, and that was you know, in the 1960s and the like, but he used to travel down to Preston, which is a suburb in Melbourne, and work for a farrier every weekend in the trotting industry, who was considered the expert in problem shoeing. He worked for that farrier for, he was Jack Ashton was his name, for I think 2 years every weekend for free. And he gained that knowledge and became, you know, known himself, Carl, as a expert in problem shoeing for farriers, for trotting trainers, and started to develop his business that way. So sometimes as young people, we can be really quick to want to get somewhere quicker than we can, because, you know, running a farrier business, and as it says on that slide, you know, one day you'll wake up and you'll be an instant overnight 20, 25 year success story. You know, it takes time. You know, it does take time. So keep your learning, continuing professional development. Go to clinics when they come up. You know, you often get clinics that are free. I know the Mustad Group put on clinics that are free. Look at online, you know, webinars, as those of you that are online today. Go to competitions. You know, learn from other people. You know, just be a sponge. You know, in terms of running a farrier business, envy can be a tough one when you're looking at other people, and you know, that we're all guilty of that. You know, everyone's guilty of that. We all aspire to be something that someone else is there. And if you look at your plan and your strategy on where your business is going, I think if you stay focused and keep working on your plan and keep, you know, iterating it and changing it a little bit when you need to, it's certainly, you know, you will get there. You've just got to have the plan, put the time in there. But there's it's very rare you get an overnight success. You know, it just doesn't happen. And if you look at social media, like, I mean, social media is a beast. You know, you need to respect it, because I've also, you know, witnessed, you know, the way forums and you know, horse owners can pile on farriers if they've done something incorrectly, and it can be, you know, it can be brutal. And I also see, you know, from a personal point of view, when you look at social media and you see what some of your you know, Facebook friends will put on there, and you think, my God, you know, is that reality? You know, rarely will they put something negative on there. I don't think I've ever seen anyone put anything negative on there, like I've stuffed up or I've done this. It's all about how great everything is. So you've got to, you know, that's not reality. You know, everyone has challenges. Social media, it can be great, and certainly great to promote yourself and your business, but you know, don't get too stuck on it. Look after your body. It's your main tool. You know, if that's one thing that you're young and bulletproof, you know, it'll come back. If you don't look after your body, you need to make sure that you're maintaining that main tool. And choosing your segment, how are you going to do that? It will determine where you live and work. Probably one of the biggest investments you'll ever make is the house you live in and where you choose to live in. And I think being in a farrier business often lends itself to a passive investment that will pay off over years if you are able to select the right place. So that requires, you know, a lot of you know, some research that you'll have to get from an expert, but that's a good thing about it. You can live in the country, you can live on the fringe, and you can service your customers that are within that 50 to 200 kilometer radius, 250 kilometers from major cities. You know, it can happen, but you need to obviously get your own advice there. Definitely the segment A and B customers, they're the ones you should be focusing on. I wouldn't waste too much time on segment C unless you have a clear strategy within your business that's something that you want to target. And there may be a reason for it. In these scenarios, I've ignored it because I see segment A and B as the best fit for maintaining, you know, longevity in the hoof care industry as a farrier. You don't have to shoe as many horses. The horses are generally, well, you know, I shouldn't say that, but they're generally going to be, you know, in a better environment and most likely, hopefully, better educated. But you know, there's always exceptions to that. But the owners should be also more open to be using, you know, the vet if it's not, you know, behaving. Research and know where your customers are. Definitely, that's something that you know, you can do quite easily. How do you find that out? You talk to your peers, you talk to other people. Like, I mean, if you look around the you know, go and see where people are, you know, show jumping and dressage, and those your target customers. You know, canvass the local clubs. You know, look at where, you know, you got your adult riding, the HRCAV, or you've got you know, your dressage events and the like. So do your research. I'm sure, you know, it is easy to find it once you identify where you want to be. Fitness and mental health, really important, as we all know. I actually caught up with 3 farriers on Tuesday, and they're all retired ex-farriers who, you know, one being Carl, my father, who's 82, another who's just given away shoeing in his 70s, and another who had to give away shoeing. He's now 67 and had to give it away when he was 52, early 50s. All have lasting injuries due to wear and tear, and you know, most of them, it's back related. So, you know, looking at, you know, I look at Carl and I've observed the aches and pains. I remember as a child when I was at home, he came home with a pinched nerve. And I still remember he had a horse lead he tied around his arm, and he hit a nail into one of the roof beams so that it could keep his arm elevated because he was in that much pain. You know, I think he's had 2 knee replacements. He's had 1 hip replacement, and all of those injuries are as a result of shoeing horses, and he gave it away at 80. So back in 2024, so he had to, because that's when he broke his hip. But looking at his body today as an 82-year-old, his shoulders, he can't lift too much above his shoulders, and he doesn't have a lot of strength below his knees. So I think keeping that regular fitness, that core strength and training, managing the numbers that you're actually servicing. I've got there Pilates and yoga, definitely really, really good for core strength. Maintaining a relationship with your physio, myo, osteo, massage therapist, whatever works for you. There is no right or wrong in that aspect. It's what works for you and what you're happy with. In terms of looking after your mind, it is a solitary, often a solitary career being a farrier. You've got financial stress, you've got the injury, financial stress at times, you've got injury, retirement, can end up, where it's facing you. You can be grieving. I think the three of those farriers that I spoke to all went through a grieving process when they had to give up shoeing, and even today when I talk to them, not one of them regrets that they're a farrier. They have all loved being a farrier and they miss it, but they went through a grieving process. So you need to prepare for that. You can prepare for that by building friendships outside of the hoof care industry, going back to those clubs and the like that you're in, that I mentioned at the start. Find a mentor, particularly good for young farriers. Always, try and strike up a relationship with another farrier, who's had some experience and you look up to. You might have family friends that have got some financial experience that might be able to just have. You might be able to have some chats with. Join a farrier association for sure. Like-minded people, connect with other professionals. I've noticed, over the years, there is a tendency for the association membership to drop, and then it goes up and then drop. I think it's really important for farriers to really support the association. I know there's always a membership fee, but it's not generally a lot of money, and it does keep you connected with the industry. There can be politics for sure, we know that, but there's no different to politics involved with sporting clubs, or politics is everywhere. That's just part of life. Look, in terms of your mind and mental health, don't isolate yourself. Just don't do it. Get involved with those associations or people that you feel you will be, you're most comfortable with. Know your costs, like we've touched on that before, but for sure, one thing that I would share. So, as managing Mustad Australia on behalf of the Mustad Group, I know when we've gone past the point of, we've break even. So I know each month how many sales that we have to make in order to cover costs and then make a profit. So that's it. That's a mental calculation that I have in my mind. So if you think of it from your business point of view, how are you going to manage that for your business? Do you know your shoe costs, nails, rasp, tools? Do you know how much your car costs? In terms of labor, like we looked at those figures, the $59 and $97 per shoeing, but are you including in that, superannuation if you're living in Australia, or pension plans, or, annual leave, other insurances, public liability, income protection, your accountant, bookkeeper? How much do you need to be able to break even and then cover your costs and pay yourself a really strong salary? If you look at the vehicle cost, the Australian Tax Office suggests that 88 cents per kilometre, Australian 88 cents per kilometre, is what it costs to run a vehicle. And they allow that as a work-related expense up to 5,000 kilometres as a set rate per kilometre if you're using it for work. But farriers, your vehicles are generally fully tax deductible because you use them every day for work. Insurances, what happens, if you make a mistake, and we all make mistakes. One thing I like to say is we as individuals, we're all perfectly imperfect. We all make mistakes. But sometimes, that can come back in terms of professional liability or public liability. You're covering yourself. income protection. What happens? You've got a home loan, you've got a car loan, and you've been kicked and your leg's broken, you can't work. How are you going to cover those costs? So those things are really important, particularly as you get older and you're starting to look at, taking on debt, you're starting a family. Talk to definitely I've got there, talk to a financial advisor. They'll be able to help you on that journey. And even talk to your Farrier Association, because they may have someone that can steer you in the right direction. But certainly things that you need to know there for sure about your business. They're the material costs there. I've just put that again. That was on the previous slide, but that's just to reinforce, work out what you're paying for steel shoes, aluminium shoes. Then you can average that. You can work out an average of, with your shoes, nails, rasps per shoeing. So you know that. Then you've got your refits in there, and also, your trims. Assign a trim cost for sure. All right, now moving on to, knowing your customers, customer segment A, delight your customer. These are really, really straightforward, easy things that you can do. Punctuality, arrive for your job on time. Seems simple, but there's nothing that's more and more annoying. Like if I have taken time off here to get a plumber to come and fix something at home, and they turn up an hour late, but I've taken the time off from work, a lot of your customers are going to be in that same boat. It is really annoying. Arrive for your job on time. If you're not going to be on time, let them know. Presentation, look professional and act professional. Don't rock up to your job, completely, in ripped clothing or looking as though you're not presentable. You can change your shirt, halfway through the day, or, have those, just make sure that you're presenting well. Communication, tell the customer the service that you're going to perform and why. Really important. Particularly in the segment A, they want to know, they crave it. You need to communicate with them. Horse handling, don't get frustrated with a horse. Prior to social media and the like, I have seen many times where farriers get frustrated, and it's usually because you're time poor. But you've got social media now. People are videoing as well. I think thankfully the industry's come a long way. I think the professionalism in looking at horses, looking after horses, is really important, because many of these horse owners in segment A and segment B, the horses are part of the family. Perform your service. Report and document your job. We'll go through this a little bit later with EQUINET, but if you set yourself up to be able to do this, there is no reason why you can't effectively give your horse owner a report similar to you get when you go to get your car serviced, and invoice accordingly for the time of the job performed. This is a really interesting discussion, these next two slides, and it really baffles me why farriers don't take advantage of this, and it's something that I'll challenge you all to think about. It may or may not be fanciful from where you're sitting, but the challenge I've got there for you is, can you add an extra $70 in profit on 25% of the service you provide, in addition to the hoof care service performed, without any extra major physical exertion? Shoeing and trimming horses is tough. I've seen it many times, and I've seen you guys are all absolutely being put through the ringer with misbehaving horses and the like. There is such a focus on that side, which is great, but when you're seeing a customer, you're a hoof care professional that they trust, that they listen to. Often you're a social worker for your customers. Why not offer them an extra service in products that you do endorse? You have to believe in those products. There is no point looking at just trying to get a quick buck, because the customers will see through that, particularly in segment A. But offer a hoof dressing, offer a hoof supplement that you believe in. Those two items potentially may make it easier to perform your work, in the next shoeing cycles that you go back. Why not sell it to them and make a profit? And this is left field, a rotational worming service, 3 to 4 times a year. How hard would it be to actually put a wormer after you finish shoeing the horse and document it and charge for it? I think they're things where you can really add some extra margin, well, effectively extra profit to your bottom line with not a lot of extra cost and not as much personal exertion required. The only personal exertion you're going to need is picking the hoof dressing and the right balance up, or the hoof supplement up from your vehicle and take it to the customer and invoice them. Rotational worming, granted, you've got to put it in their mouth and make sure they swallow it, but it's not the same as shoeing or trimming a horse. And the next slide, we'll look at how it could look. And if you talk to your dealer and you are able to get a discount off a hoof grease or a dressing that you believe in, and then on sell it to that customer at the retail price while you make a margin. What I've put up here is that a 1 litre hoof dressing every 2 months, rotational worming, every 4 months. So that's 3 times a year. And then a hoof supplement like Right Balance, which is a 2.5 kilo tub, you would sell 6 of those at 50 grams a day as a dose. So that all adds up really quickly to $340 a year in extra profit that you could add to your service. If you extrapolate that out and say, all right, of the horses that I'm servicing, and based on 1,380 trims from scenario 1 and 2, 1,380 hoof care services, which includes shoeings and trims, you're shoeing 120 horses per annum, and you're shoeing, trimming 60 horses. So that adds up to a total of 180 horses. Assume 25% of those customers with those horses want to take you up on those 3 additional services, which many of them are going to be using and buying for themselves. It could end up at an extra $15,323 straight to your bottom line. That is something that I just see that as money for jam. I think that would be something that you could branch out a bit, and it also gives you longevity. It's good for your body, but you've got to believe in it. That's the key. Knowing your customer segment B, that's a little bit different. But also, you don't have to give the service that you're giving segment A, but you still have to be consistent. Punctuality is important. Make sure you present well, communicate, horse handling, all those things, invoice accordingly. So it's all the things that of segment A, but you're probably not going to give the focus that you're going to give for segment A, because the segment A's actually expect a lot more. Dealing with suppliers, excuse me. Dealing with suppliers, as I mentioned earlier, the suppliers are no different to farriers. We have in the supply industry some similar pain points. There's staff, there's invoices to pay for suppliers, just like farriers. So, the way to look at it, and many of you already have great relationships. I don't know too many. Like within the farrier industry, it is a very, very, I love working in the farrier industry. I think it's fantastic that people in it are just good people. And, if I look at the dealer farrier relationship, in most cases, they're very, very strong. Order in the most efficient way that suits you. Don't overstock. Leave that with your supplier. Ask your dealer if you have any deals. The worst they can do is say no. Pay them on time. You're going to get the best service. If you're late, get on the front foot. Just let your supplier know. It just helps them plan. They're always going to support you. It's always a really good thing about the communication there. And particularly if you need therapeutic special order products, check with your supplier in advance, so you don't overstock, and make sure that they've got stock of them. Pain points for farriers. If we look there, payments from customers, accounting term for customers is a debtor. Cash flow is king. Financial pressures affect everyone at some point in time. They certainly don't put off, the financial pressures. It's the best way is to communicate. So communicate with suppliers. If you're going to be late, ask for a payment plan. If you have a cash flow issue, let me tell you, every business not just Farriers, every business at one point in their journey is going to have a cash flow problem. And, you know, those that go and talk to their suppliers and say, look, I'm not going to be able to pay this month, but I'll be able to pay for what I take, and I can pay off the rest next month or over 2 months. Talk and communicate. You know, you've misbehaving horses, dangerous. You know, my opinion on that is, look, I mean, as I say, I'm not a farrier, but don't shoe them. You know, don't be a hero. If you actually get injured, that's your business. Just you know, politely decline to do it, or say you're going to have to get the vet in here to sedate it. Don't put yourself in that danger, that risk, because again, if you break a leg or you injure your back, you know, it's a long way back, and horse owners don't care. You know, they're worried about their horse. They're you know, the farrier, going back to one of those initial comments, they're going to replace you. So don't take that risk. You know, it's a work health and safety risk. Stables, yeah, it can be a poor working environment. You know, dogs, always an issue. I'm not a real fan of dogs, especially the bigger ones. Punctuality, customers can hold you up. Yeah, bookkeeping, I'll get into that a little bit more, but you know, the one common solution for all of these pain points is communication. You need to really to communicate. Look, I'll move on to this one, which is difficult conversations, and this is one of the really important areas for any business. It is really normal for everyone, when we've got to have a difficult conversation, you're going to feel anxiety. You know, no one likes to have a confrontation. You know, confrontation doesn't mean yelling and swearing and ranting and raving. It could be things like going to your client and saying, listen, I need to increase the prices, you know, or you haven't paid me. And, you know, if we look at the increasing prices, and I think this is an issue that happens within the hoof care industry, farriers don't tend to increase prices enough every year. So consumer price index, or inflation, is generally something that always increases. The only time in my professional career within Australia that has gone backwards was during COVID. And it only went back for, I think, 1 quarter, and then an increase and caught up. So the inflationary impact is not just, don't ever think of it just on hoof care equipment. Your buying power, every time you do not increase your prices, your buying power is eroded by inflation or consumer price index. So you need your ability to buy fuel, to buy food and groceries, and you know, pay rent if you have to. It all gets eroded if you don't increase. So it's something that you really have to have. You know, I would recommend it annually. Look at what inflation is doing in your country. And I would be, you know, looking at a time every year to put your prices up. You know, I often see, you know, farriers hesitant to do it. And it reminds me of a funny story. I have mentioned this before to some farriers, but my father, Carl, shared a story in the 70s. He had this one harness racing stable that he couldn't put the price up because they used to give him morning tea and they'd have a beer after they'd finished the day's work. And that trainer used to say to Carl, oh, look, this industry is getting tough. The prize money's not increasing. You know, it's really, really bad times. Carl got so sorry for this guy that, you know, 3 years later, he hadn't had a price increase, and he was 25% cheaper than anyone else. Might have been 4 years. I think it was 25% cheaper than anyone else, because he already had a discounted price because of his volume. So Dad spoke to someone about this. He Carl spoke to a mentor about this, and the mentor said to him, well, you know, you need to reverse the discussion. So he went back to that customer and said, look, you know what, I'm thinking about giving horseshoeing away. It's just getting really tough. You know, I'm struggling. You know, I'm not getting ahead. He just put on the story, and then, you know what that trainer said? He said, well, you're just going to have to put your prices up, aren't you? So that's one way. You know, you can look at it from the point of view that if you're not communicating with those customers and you're not being regular with your increases, your price increases, you are going to go backwards. So you need to do it every year in line with a minimum in line with the CPI or inflation. Having discussions around unsafe work environments, that can also be an impact. Getting your clients comparing your work or shoes or products that they're using that you're not using, that can also be an impact. But often my response to that is don't get angry, and provided it's not going to be a welfare industry concern, try it, but charge them a premium to do it, and then review the results later on. But you should also log your work. I think my biggest tip for difficult conversations is always get that person that you want to have that conversation away from other distractions. So you need their attention. You need to say to them, look, I want to have a private conversation with you, and move them away. Make sure you rehearse what you're going to say with that person. If you rehearse it with someone you can confide in and get feedback about how you've delivered that. And what you find is the more you rehearse it, the less that anxiety goes away. You start to control that a little bit more, and it comes out, the message comes out better. If you see that person explode, don't explode back. A simple comment might be like, I respect your point of view, but unfortunately, I can't agree with it. You might be able to defuse the situation, and sometimes it's okay that you can agree to disagree and move on. That happens. It's rare to happen, but if you're able to pull someone out, have the difficult conversation with them, and that means for customers, for employees, within your families and so forth. It's always best when you do it controlled, respectfully, and away from distractions. Don't get angry. The worst thing you do is have a confrontation or a difficult conversation when other people are in earshot, because that can embarrass the person who you're trying to have that conversation with. Moving on, we've already discussed if you can't play, if you're having difficulty paying suppliers, just communicate with them. Arrange a payment plan. That's always the best way. General tips for business: get a good accountant, bookkeeper. From an accountant's point of view, you need to talk to them about tax liabilities, prepare for tax planning. Set your funds aside for when you have to pay your goods and services tax or your pay-as-you-go tax in Australia. Make sure you've got that cash. Bank loans, they want to see regular income from self-employed individuals. You need to have consistent income. So make sure your books are in order. You've got that continuity. Make sure you've got regular income if you're wanting to go for a loan. Keep invoicing up to date. Cash flow is king. It is really king. You can be the most profitable business and still go bankrupt. If you are not collecting your cash from your debtors, your customers, you will go broke. So, I've heard farriers tell me, oh, this person owes me in 90 days, but it's like cash in the bank. It's not cash in the bank. It's cash in the bank when it's in your bank. So you really need to be on top of them. So make sure that your invoicing's up to date. If they're a day over, you need to send out a reminder. If they get a month over, I'd be considering, is that a customer I want to be servicing? Because that they really are making life difficult for you. It's your money. That's your personal exertion. That's your income. That's what you need. Running your own business, you don't get paid leave. You don't get public holidays. You don't get personal days or superannuation. You need to plan for it. Make sure you've got that work-life balance. Get your superannuation, regularly contribute, or, talk to a financial planner and have a strategy for life after shoeing. Get a professional advice. That might be a mixture of superannuation or, buying a property or looking at, other options. Allocate funds for regular holidays. You need to have time as a family, for work-life balance. It impacts because your body, if it's getting sore and you don't have time to regenerate. I know for many of you that's going to sound hard to swallow, and you're going to say, well, I can't do that. If you're planning your scheduling and shoeing cycle, to be able to get a break, once a quarter, or, and it could be a long weekend. If you can't get a week, it might be you get a Friday and a Monday off. It's all about scheduling and planning. So, how can you best do that? Consider income protection and insurance. Talk to your financial advisor or accountant. You're all different, but if you've got loans and you're injured, or if you're killed and your family's left with these debts, you need to make sure that you've got a plan for that. And insurances, there are life insurances you get. The older you get, the more expensive it gets. But when you're young, it's certainly, cost effective to be able to consider those things. Thoughts to reconsider. Remember, the horse owners, trainers, and farm managers and clients are not your friends. It is a business agreement and transaction. Now, there definitely are exceptions to that rule. No doubt many of you have made friends and you're shoeing their horses for them. However, you need to make sure that you understand that it is a transactional arrangement. You can only shoe or trim so many horses in your career. You need to make sure you make them count. Make sure that you're not doing, the things that they're going to be detrimental to that. Sometimes, those trainers and owners, they're going to drop you, and that creates a grieving process for sure. So, make sure that when that does happen, you're ready for it. Be ready for tough conversations, with those horse owners, and so talk about price increases, and if they owe you money, just be forthright, get in their face. The person that actually is the loudest will get paid first. So if they're overdue, you need to go and continually follow up with them. Don't not say something, because they will forget you and they'll pay other people who are louder. Stay professional. The morning tea, the afternoon tea, be gracious. But that shouldn't impact your ability to have price increases or to be paid for the job you've been doing. That they're the things you definitely need to do. You can enjoy those things, and that's great, but also make sure you've got that professional approach with them, and adapt it depending on the segment you're in, the customer segment. If you're unable to work, these are the cold hard facts, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this. The clients will move very quickly on to the next farrier. But remember, it is personal, and you will take it personal. But remember, it's a business transaction. Keeping that perspective, it makes that transition less stressful. It doesn't make it easy though. We all have. When we get some bad news, or we lose something, if we lose a job or we lose a client, there's always going to be some grieving there. But you've got to get to acceptance. The quicker you get to acceptance, then you move on. And that's where we need to be when that happens. And most importantly, every horse you provide a hoof care service to is one less horse that you can provide a hoof care service to. Make it count. If that's one bit of advice I can give you, that's the main bit of advice I would give you. So that's the webinar from my perspective. Hayley, I might hand over to you, and I'm going to talk here about EQUINET. We're just going to do some very quick slides here on EQUINET, and I'll relate that back to areas that I've discussed. But Hayley will present the ins and outs of the technical side. So Hayley, would you like to discuss?
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Dan. I'm sure everyone found that really informative of what you've gone through. Lots of questions. As Dan mentioned, I'm going to be talking about EQUINET. It's been around obviously for a few years now, and some of you today here will be using EQUINET in your day-to-day business, or be aware of it, or have looked at it in the past. And so really just, I guess, as Dan said, and he will touch on that more when we go specifically into features, is just how EQUINET can help your business and streamline it. Some things here, as we've talked about, those Farrier challenges and how EQUINET can help. Clear communication, everything is in one place. There's no lost notes, no confusion. When you want to look everything up, you've got your photos there, you've got your contacts, you've got the last entries that you've worked on, all the information that you need is in that one place. Smart scheduling. So as Dan again mentioned before, with the scheduling, your clients will know, when their appointment is first made and when it's due. So there's no confusion or appointments turning up to an appointment and them not being there. Less admin, more shoeing. So invoicing, the app has invoicing, inventory management, shopping lists, everything can be organized and hassle-free. And it also works online and offline. So yeah, if you want to get to the next one. I did mean to say as well, obviously it's been around for a few years now. Mustad is very much all about, the sort of mission is very much making life easier for farriers. And that's why we made that decision to go more into the digital services. So it is, I guess, another tool that you have in your armour as you would be using, sort of your nipper or a rasp, etc. This is another, extension of that. It's that day-to-day business management. So everything is in that one place. As I've sort of talked about before, so you've got that you can create horse entries, you can place shopping lists, keep on top of your inventory management, schedule those appointments. If you work in a team, you can collaborate all together. So everything that you do is in that one place. All the work that everyone does, from contractors, apprentices, can all be seen in that one app. As Dan was mentioning with the invoicing and having a bookkeeper, we have quite a few people that have their bookkeepers part of the team, so they can actually see the work that's been done and invoice out. So that creates a much more seamless operation as it comes to the end of the month or when you might be invoicing. We'll just touch now on to some specifics and relate, as Dan said, back to what he's been covering off today. So that horse log and service report. So it's all about know your customer and service them accordingly. The horse log or horse entry, that will record services for every horse that you work on. And you can within there have the notes, the photos, products used that you can then add procedures and pricing to that entry as well, which then can be generated into an invoice. Sharing professional reports. So that entry can then be created into a report that can be shared with the horse owner or the stud manager, a vet as well. You can add sort of those photos, you can add x-rays so you can kind of go back and forth. And if you're in a team, as I said, everything is in that one app. There. So I think Dan touched on before these service reports, we get a lot of very positive feedback on those, being able to share with customers. It really sort of lifts that professionalism and it could be like you get your report when you get your car service. It just outlays what work has been done, and it keeps track as well the journey of maybe the horse that you've been seeing from sort of day one all the way through to maybe when it moves on somewhere else. Did you want to jump in, Dan?
Yeah, just on this one, if I'm a farrier, this is the feature that I would be absolutely using as often as I could, because if I'm targeting segment A customers and segment B, but particularly segment A, to be able to provide a service report with photos of what you've done, you're going to delight the customer. They're going to really appreciate that. In terms of the farrier, you're protecting yourself, you're logging your work. So in terms of that professional indemnity and the liability factor of that, you're covered if you're documenting your work. If you're confident that the work you've done is up to scratch, you've got no problems. If you haven't documented it, it's more difficult to prove. So horse log is for me absolutely one of the key features that I would be starting with. If you're not using EQUINET, that's the one I would be starting with now. Absolutely go for it and use it. Can also, you can attach it if you're with Xero and QuickBooks. If you connect with EQUINET, you can also attach the horse log, I believe, Hayley.
Yeah, that's right. The report. Yeah, for sure. That brings us on to the invoicing. So nice little segue there. And so from that entry, as I said, you can then create an invoice from there. You can connect to QuickBooks or Xero through the app, and it's as simple as preparing an invoice of all the work or entries that you've done for a client and authorizing it and sending it straight out. we know of people that are using it, and they're actually getting paid on at the time of the job, because they're sending that invoice, the customer's getting it, and they're paying it. So just depending on when you're obviously sending out your invoices each month, you just when you're ready to invoice, you can all the information is there from the entries, and yeah, there's no just sort of no worrying about trying to sort of understand writing, or what might, what job maybe you've done 2 weeks ago when you were going to now create the invoicing. Everything is already in there, sitting in the app, so there's no confusion, no spelling of horse names, things like that. Everything it's very straightforward, and as I said, once that's all set up, it can take some time, obviously, with anything to set things up, but once it is, it's a very quick and straightforward process.
Yeah, in relation to invoicing, cash is king. If you're able to invoice on the spot, and I know some of you do using other means, but EQUINET enables you to put your horse log in there plus your invoicing, and you can get paid quickly if you're able to get that invoice to your customer quicker. It's no doubt the quicker you can get it, the quicker you get paid, the better your cash flow is going to be.
So yeah, moving on to that smart scheduling. So as Dan sort of touched upon, that communicating with customers, whether it's the customers sort of you turn up and that they say they don't know that you were meant to come, or or even just to be organized for yourself to see when you have some time available. But the EQUINET smart scheduling is again, we get lots of really great feedback on that. The RSVP element, so basically what happens is you would create that appointment, and then you would send that invite to your customers via SMS or email. They then respond to say, yep, yes, that appointment works for me, and it gets booked in basically into your calendars and also into your clients. They will also receive a reminder. You can set reminders up, so whether it's the day before, so that there's no confusion or difficult conversations about appointments, no shows, etc., things like that. You can also add horses that you're going to be working on. So it's kind of like a daily work list. So you have those listed in there, all the horses, and each time you then obviously you'll be regularly servicing these clients and these horses. You can then duplicate that appointment for future bookings, and all the information is sitting in there. And there's different views that you can have. Some people like the list view, some like day, week, month. But yes, something this is definitely, and again, feedback from those using it and from their clients, that they really love this element of the RSVP reminder. So it's obviously aligned with a doctor's appointment. You get your your initial appointment sent to you, and then your reminder. So yeah, that's something that is an element of the app as well.
I think a challenge for farriers to consider with this feature is in relation to your work-life balance. So how do you get time off? You need to schedule it. You need to make sure that you're planning for it. So everything in business you need to plan for. The best businesses are the ones that are planned and ready and able to execute. So if you need time off with the family and you want that work-life balance, use such a module like smart scheduling to be able to block that time off. If you need to get a long weekend or a week off, this is how you do it. You actually block it off and you build your cycles around it. So these are really powerful for your own body rejuvenating and your own mental health. Everyone needs a break. That's the one thing that is difficult for working by yourself. Just plan for it if you can.
And the final thing we'll look at is the shopping list and inventory management. So stock control made easy with EQUINET. You can see you can create your own digital inventory, looking at the stock that you have in your truck, and it'll alert you whether you're sort of running low on particular products, which will then enable you to make a shopping list and share with your dealers. The products that you use in the entry, so your shoes or nails, they automatically get deducted when you create an entry from your inventory, and then, as I said, that allows you to alerts you that you need to stock up. The shopping list then can be created and shared to your hoof care dealer, and they can then prepare the order in there for you, so you can pick up, or alternatively, a little bit like a shopping list. I know when I go to the supermarket, if I don't make a shopping list, I always come out with something I've forgotten. So again, you can kind of build that list up over the month, or however often you might go to stock up, and you've got your list sitting there ready to go.
Yeah, a great reminder, this one. That's not just mustard stock in the shopping list. It's all as many competitor products as we can put in there. You can share it with your own dealer. What the beauty of this is that I see farriers often will go to their supplier. They'll drive 30, 40 minutes down the road. Oh, I didn't get that egg bar. Oh, I forgot that heart bar. And then they have to drive back, or there's the stress of getting that product. So this is a really great reminder. It's efficient, and keeps you focused on, and you don't forget. In terms of the inventory management, absolutely, if you know what you've got in stock. Takes some discipline, but you do, if you use that feature, it's a powerful tool.
So yeah, pretty much that is everything that you would need to run your Farrier business all in one place in the app. The EQUINET is available on your mobile device, and also online. So we sort of recommend that you be using your phone on the go, whether it's your phone or the iPad tablet, where you record all your entries, and then you can use the web version when you're back. It's with that larger screen, so you can sort of put your scheduling in for the week, or doing your invoicing. So there's both those elements that you can take advantage of with the app. So that's the end. Yeah, that's the end of the presentation. Obviously, with regards to EQUINET, if anyone has any questions, you can always go to the EQUINET app website, and book a demo in. Obviously, we're a little bit over time, which is fine. I think there was some really great stuff that we needed to get through, and it was just, if there's any questions, if anyone had any questions. There doesn't appear to be any questions in the chat, but if anyone did have any questions for Dan, or anything about EQUINET, sort of raise your hand now. Just press the raise hand button and we can unmute you. Alternatively, obviously you can reach out sort of separately as well with any questions.
Yeah, I've probably spoken too much tonight, so I apologise for everyone. If you want to reach out to me, you can ring me at Mustad Australia at the office, or at my email, dan.o'dwyer@mustad.com. So yeah, if you want to, that's Dan, dan.odwyer@mustad.com. So
thank you. Well, yeah, I think we'll leave it there. It doesn't seem like anyone has any questions at this point. But yeah, no, I think it's been. Hopefully, you've all found it very much. Thanks, Alice. That's great. Hopefully, you've all found that very interesting and a bit of food for thought there, I'm sure. As I said, we will be sharing this video through our YouTube channel, so look out for that as well, and we'll send emails. But thank you, everyone, for coming on board tonight.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. See ya.
See you later.